All right, Corey, let's get to the nitty gritty.
So we're going to talk about enemy engagement and disengagement, which you find in the player's manual on pages 148 through 152. D6 is all about combat.
So this little token here, Corey, this is their HP. This one token that has his image on it, this is his life. This is his health point, his hit point. Once I'm engaged with this monster and I make it through that combat roll, he is removed after one hit. Now, if there's multiple monsters and I'm engaged in one first, I could choose which one I want to engage with. But once I engage with one monster, once he's dead, I have to fight the other remaining monsters on the board, but the rules still apply. I could still choose which one to fight. So for example, if all three of these guys were here, I might want to take the easiest first, kill him, and then say, okay, now I'm engaged, but with which one? And then I could go for the next one, and then the next one, and so forth.
And once you're ready to fight, you must announce it to your opponent so they have a chance to react. Now, this is the only time that the opponent can add buffs and react during that combat. So, Jesse, I'm going to attack that werewolf.
But wait, now that I know Corey is going to fight this Minotaur here, this is my chance to buff. There's a few buffs I can play. For example, I can give the monster Steel Teeth. This allows me to place 1+1 buff on the monster. So I grab a red buff, plus side up, and I lay it on top. No matter what the monster rolls, he's gonna get a +1. Another kind of buff, there's these little Mad Lib ones. I read this, fill in the blank, and this one says I can place 1 HP on a monster. So I would get the token with the heart side and place that on the monster. Other types like this one's fun. This allows me to stop Corey from using any cards. So I would play this down also, and now Corey can't play a weapon.
So there's no limit to the amount of buffs that you can place on this creature.
So be as cruel as you want. You could play a couple of buffs, your friends can play a couple of buffs, make Corey's turn as hard as humanly possible. We have two types of buff on each token. We have the HP, which is the heart, and then we have the +1, which adds to combat, that's the +1. We're gonna talk about the heart. Once an HP is placed on a monster, we've said that the monster token himself is a hit. This acts as another one of those. The way the HP works is it will not be removed until the monster is hit in combat. So even if the monster is moved around the board, that HP is going to travel with him until removed. And also multiple HPs can be put on him. So if the monster has 2 of them, technically he has 3 life total. You hit him once, and then you kill him. Okay, it's at this point that Corey gets to continue his turn. We've all buffed, it's back to him.
Now, I could turn in 3 specialty hides to transform this engaged monster, which you'll find out more of that on pages 164 and 165 of the player's manual. Now, if I don't intend to transform this monster, I can go ahead and roll my natural d6 for combat, or I can play a weapon card.
Now, there's 2 types of advantages. There's buffs, which we'll talk about later, but the weapon, you play this before the combat roll because this is going to be determining what you're rolling during combat.
Some weapons have an added benefit beyond the die roll.
So you might be wondering, why would I ever want to replace my natural d6 with the d4? Well, down at the bottom, dual wield. Any weapon with dual wield can be played at the same time as another weapon or with your natural d6, so that's going to buff that weapon up quite a bit. Then you'll have things like critical. A weapon that has critical at the bottom lets you double whatever you roll. You'll have things like ranged, which means even if you miss, he doesn't hit you. And then you have pluses to your combat roll. There's several weapons that have +2, +3, making that weapon naturally stronger. There's all kinds of little added bonuses to some of the weapons you'll find in the advantage deck.
So once you've had the monster buffed, once you've chosen a weapon, it's time to roll the combat die. So now the hero rolls the die that corresponds with their weapon.
And during this, the GM will also be rolling the monster's die that corresponds with the token. Once the rolls are made, the monster's going to add up all of his buffs. That's going to be any buffs that are naturally on his token or any buffs the other players placed on the token.
Now, if your combat total doesn't exceed that of the monsters, you still have some options, such as...
Plenty of things to do. I could spend 2 coins and buy advantage cards. Now, what I'm looking for is buffs, because I can't use weapons, but I could buy as many of those as I want and stack them on, trying to get a higher roll.
I could use some of my skills to help increase that combat roll number.
Lots of potion options. Number 1, I could buff my weapon, or I could make the monster re-roll his dice with a potion. If that still doesn't work, I could just get the hell out of dodge with a potion.
Or you could cash in 2 coins to purchase a dog mud, which allows you to re-roll any one of your combat die.
There are lots of things you could do to balance out your combat roll.
If you can't avoid the loss, you'll simply lose 1 HP.
As for the monster, he's going to go ahead and remove any of the +1 buffs that were placed on him. Now, HPs that were placed on him is going to stay there until he's hit.
I will then discard any of the cards that I used during that round of combat, but I am still engaged with that enemy. And if you beat the enemy, you gain all the benefits of that victory.
So if it's a monster, you'll get the hide or you'll get the bounty. If it's a guardian, you're going to collect the glory points, or if it's a Plan of Eden, you're going to throw them back in the bag and get the 2 coins. But the important thing is, no matter what you kill in combat, you're going to gain 2 coins for it. Okay, that's if you killed the enemy. If that monster had an additional HP, you win the combat roll, the HP is removed, but he still remains on the board.
Any of the buffs or combat advantages that are still on the enemy are to be removed. Any of the advantages or cards that you played in the last round of combat are removed as well, and you are still engaged with that enemy. Now remember, you remain engaged with that enemy until one of a few things happens. Either you kill it kills you, or you disengage from that enemy.
So if there's multiple enemies in your space, you're engaged with all of them. So once you kill that first monster, you could then choose the next monster in that space that you want to engage with until either you kill him, he kills you, or you leave. And you'll do that to every monster until your area is cleared.
If you're engaged in combat and can't take another hit or choose not to, well, there's a couple of different ways that you could disengage.
There's several things you could do. You could take a potion which lets you leave that space, or use a skill that could let you leave that space. You could even play cards that moves you from one space to another. There's a bunch of things you could do. Remember, just because you're engaged doesn't mean you can't unengage by playing certain cards. You just cannot perform actions when engaged. Let me tell you the most popular way a player can get out of combat. He disengages by chibbing out. This allows him to move one free adjacent space and not take any damage. So what you'll do is you'll wait till the roll is made. You'll realize, I can't beat this monster, I chib out. You take no damage and you get a free move. Now what happens is your natural D6 is going to lower to a natural D4. This is not great for future combat rolls, but it is going to make it a lot easier to stealth, and it's going to give you more successful stat rolls in general. While in chip form, you're going to play the game as normal. The only difference is you cannot use weapon advantages. You could still buy them, you could still play buffs, but you cannot physically change your D4 by playing a weapon card. You're a D4. How do you return to human form? You use your potion of Acupunch. This is the only time this potion is going to be used, but by using that, you'll flip your card back over, giving yourself your D6 and the ability to play weapons again. Now let me tell you about chibbing when you're a werewolf. This is actually fun and unique. Why? Because everybody else when they chib, they drop down to a D4. When a werewolf chibs, he actually boosts his D6 up to a D8. This makes him a lot stronger in his chib form than in his human form. Now, the downside to it is just like every other chib, he can't use a weapon. But even worse, he cannot enter the village as long as he's a werewolf. Okay, keep one major thing in mind. The combat rolls that are made is not what has happened, it is what is going to happen. So if Corey's the monster and I'm the hero, and we both roll our dice, and he wins, I'm not taking a hit yet. I only take the hit if I remain in that space. So it's always worth going ahead and taking that swing if I have a way out. Worst case, I lose, I leave, I lose nothing.
Also remember to keep an eye on the compass dial. If it is on the 3rd round or the 6th, well then that's going to be the Hunter's Moon, and that gives monsters a +2.
And that's a +2 advantage. He cannot lose that. That is not a buff that's going to go away. As long as you're in a Hunter's Moon, he's going to have a +2. But talk about this enemy here. This is a guardian. It is not a monster and therefore cannot be treated as such. This means I cannot place a buff on it, and then the Hunter's Moon will not affect it. What you're looking at is what you're dealing with. If it's 20 + 4, it's 20 + 4. They cannot be affected by the other players.
And then in regards to the Plants of Eden, it is a base 3+. There's no die roll involved in it. Now what does the 3+ mean?
Well, first he has a 50% chance of beating you if you're a regular hero, so these boys are bad news. But when the second Poe is placed on the board, that's going to give every Plant of Eden a +1. So when there's 2 of them, they're a natural 4. There's 3 of them, they're all natural 5s. Do not let them get out of control. They're a nuisance, kill them as quick as they pop up. Collect your 2 gold and move on.